The mixing fans, we could turn those off and it would be a little less breezy, but the problem is then the warm air tends to stay up, so it's a mixed blessing. But shall I turn that off? Feels, yeah, okay. Maybe at the human comfort break we can turn it back on for a second just to kind of steal back some of that very expensive hot air that we have. We had a problem with the gas company in a sense, but there was a little tiny scent of gas, and rather than come to me, one of the volunteers immediately called the gas company, which is a little bit terrifying because this is a really old building and it has 9 different gas appliances in it. And I shall take this off since I am the presenter. So anyway, the gas, 3 hours later, the nice person from the gas company had checked every single one of the 9 appliances and only put a red tag on one of them. I was most worried that they would put it on the heater for our little apartment, in which case that would have been a cold night. It worked out fine, but he reminded me that the gas price was going up another 7% next month, just in case you'd gotten used to the new gas price had gone up. So, I don't see Reverend Shelley. I don't know. Reverend Shelley, where'd you go? That had no effect. So, where shall we start? How about the reading? Did you enjoy the reading? There was a part about the part about the life of the Buddha. Is that what we read? Okay, yeah. And if someone brought something interesting on a flag to post it, dog-eared a page, that's usually what we share at this point. I know it's only been 3 times now. It's not really a big pattern to get used to, but that is the pattern we were trying to propagate. So, looking for volunteers.
Well, I shared last time
Ah.
when the drunken man, his friend, put the jewel in his coat and he didn't know what the idea is that you have it.
Right, we have that Manji jewel, that Buddha nature. We have it anyway, we just don't know it, that drunken friend that had some. Ironically, one time when coming back from Sri Lanka, I literally sewed rubies, small rubies, into a friend's, the hem of her dress, just for fun. I mean, it's not like they were going to stop me at customs or anything, but it was fun. What is your question?
Because that was what I was sharing.
Oh, yeah.
But that it resonated.
It's a wonderful idea that we have that potentiality. We want to remember that. Did you have?
This is more of a sharing than a question. But,
Ah.
and we discussed this last time we covered it, but as I was reading, I was kind of represent to the end of the Buddha's life.
Mm.
And, you know, the idea that there's this sort of very real way in which he died.
Often we say ignominious death because he just died, 80 years old, by the side of the road of dysentery, which couldn't have been good.
It seems very human to me. And it's sort of authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, as a person, I'm interested in the experiences of what a person
Of another person,
Yeah.
not some magic, mythical, made up. Yeah.
There's no way to know that that's not how I'm going to go. And so there's something to learn from that. You know?
Mm-hmm. And there's 2 things that I would take from the death of the Buddha, you know, by the side of the road between 2 sal trees, not quite making it to his destination. You know, he just told Ananda, I have to stop here. And that was it. The 2 things are, it's the normal death of a human. It occurs when it occurs, when the causes and conditions for your life are no longer present, then your death will occur. And the Buddha didn't have any special powers beyond that. I mean, he did sort of have special powers in the sense that prior to that, he mentioned to Ananda that, you know, I'm not going to be here much longer. So there was some foreshadowing in the sutras, if you look back to the sutras. The other interesting thing I like to point out, I had a pillow here last time, and that's not what I'm trying to point out. I'm just looking for the damn pillow. Anyway, so we, the Buddhist community, has had 2,600 years to come up with a better story, and we didn't, because that's what happened, and we're quite committed as a community to what is actually happening. So, it's a stretch in postmodern society to use the word truth, because you immediately get inundated by a bunch of 1850 philosophers that say that doesn't exist. But anyway, there is much more than a kernel of truth in that. And then the sutra goes on to go through the whole process of the funeral and the cremation, and even how they wrap the body. All these things are in the sutra. I don't think that was in the reading, because that was just a condensed piece. But that ending is important. Yeah. So thank you for pointing that out. And you, sir?
I was reading on page 26.
Okay.
And it was passage 3, and it was mentioning the Buddha's threefold body.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't quite understand that. I mean, there was an aspect of essence, it says, an aspect of potentiality, and an aspect of manifestation.
So on page 23, in the third paragraph, is that right? 26, the third paragraph, it's talking about the trikaya. Kaya just means body, and tri, we all know, this is really starting to get my back. Just let me interrupt. I have to go find this pillow. There is a pillow underneath the bell, but that's the sacred pillow. I found a pillow. See, this is interesting because you can read my thoughts. Did you read my thoughts while I was getting the pillow? This looks like a very ample pillow. Okay, so a little too ample. The Trikaya is an interesting idea. So the three bodies of the Buddha are the Dharmakaya, the Nirmanakaya, and did they tell us the third one? Sambodhikaya. Okay, so the easiest one to understand is a physical manifestation body, the body that died by the side of the road between two salt trees, that aspect of the Buddha. And the second easiest idea that's possible to understand is the Dharmakaya, because, and I say truth body because it is the way things really are. So that's the sense that the Buddha, after enlightenment, has tuned in to the everythingness of the universe, and that's our true body. It's also your true body, it's also mine, but yours and mine are delusional words. Really, we're part of everything. I would say just part of everything, but it's actually quite a fantastic thing. So it's not just, we are actually part of everything. Wow. So that's true of a Buddha, and a Buddha has had that realization of the deep interconnection. And it seems from sutras that it's not just, wow, I'm really part of everything, which is a kind of pleasant realization. It's a fundamental interconnection with everything, so that if you wanted to know what Amida Buddha was teaching right now, 20 million leagues to the west in the Buddha field of Amida Buddha, you could do this and kind of tune into it. In the sutra, that's what the Buddha does. He just sort of, he brightens and looks to the west, and Ananda is there in the sutra and says, why do you look so vibrant? He goes, oh, I was listening to this Dharma talk. Now, it sounds a little bit like he's listening on the radio or something, right? Yeah, but once you have tuned in to all of that, then maybe space and time and all the kind of seemingly stable constructs that we separate, my humans, experience, maybe they're not quite as definitive as they seem. So being able to go from one place to another as easily as a man extends his arm or brings his arm back. That's the way it says in the sutra. Sometimes the Buddha does go places like this, and he's there, places miles and miles away. And often in the West, we kind of skip over those sutras because it seems kind of silly. I can't beam myself from one place to another. Gee, beaming oneself from one place to another is ridiculous. Except in Star Trek, they beam themselves down all the time, and we think that's neat. So there's some there's more to it than what we see, and the Buddha, through the Dharmakaya, can connect to that. It's vibrations or energy or, bending space, I don't know, all those things. Dharmakaya, the truth, the way everything really is. In the Matrix movies, after Neo gets his eyes burned out, what he's seeing is the Dharmakaya. He's actually not using eyes and perception and mental formations to see what's really there. He's just in tune with what is actually there. In the movie, they had to make it kind of flaming, glowing world. If you could see everything as clouds of atoms instead of reflected photons that your eyes sense, that would be a way of saying that idea. Dharmakaya. Okay. The most difficult one for me is the Nirmanakaya, which is, there's a lot of different words for it. I've heard people say the presentation body, and the best way to describe this is what we experience as Amida Buddha it's not just a regular person around. It's a wonderful manifestation. Do we see it? We experience it? That's the hardest one for me. Yeah. So there's three aspects. Now, I bet all human beings have the potentiality and really do manifest in these three ways, but only after enlightenment is it possible to talk about it or visible or something like that. So the Trikaya is an interesting idea and useful in many ways. Okay. I'm assuming Reverend Shelley turned on the streaming thing because she's not up there. She usually turns on the streaming thing when I start going through the presentation, but let's do that. Okay. So this is our third class, and last time we talked about the life of the Buddha, but those foundational ideas from the first class are things like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Four Marks of Existence. Probably should zoom in. I can't even read it myself. The Four Sights. We talked about those. Okay. But what I want to talk about today is the Eightfold Path, because if the Four Noble Truths go like this, that life can be joyful, but people don't live joyfully. So that's kind of an interesting insight that the Buddha had. And then he started really looking into this deeply, and he saw that the reason people didn't live life in a joyful way was because they thirst for things, they want things, they cling to things. That experience, most of all clinging just to I, me, my as a self is painful, but then everything else is an echo. Everything else we cling to is an echo of that. So then he looked at that and he figured out, so if there was a problem, and that's the cause, the second noble truth, and the third noble truth is if you take away that cause, if you don't have that wanting and clinging and thirsting, then joy will just naturally flow in. You will experience essentially the Dharmakaya as it really is, which is quite wonderful and joyful and like that. So that's the three noble truths. And here's the problem with Buddhism is there are a lot of lists. The reason is because we didn't have writing, so we had to remember everything by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. I think that's a trick because, it's really, what is it? 8, 9, 10, 11, the 11-fold path, you know, but if you said 11-fold path, if you do make a clickbait thing and you say the 11 reasons people shouldn't, you know, be mean to their friends, nobody clicks on that. If you say the 3 reasons, they're like, yeah, I could read 3 reasons, you know, and you don't read the first paragraph, you scroll down to where the numbers start, right, and you read 1, 2, 3, got it, you know, you're out of there. Does anybody else do that sometimes? I'm just trying to be honest. Yeah. So that's the reason I think it's interesting, because it's 2,600 years ago, and essentially people are the same. You can't say there's 11 things you got to remember. I can tell you 4, of which the first 3 are quite clear and understandable, and then the 4th one is a giant, complicated thing. I thought I'd already done that. Did I accidentally zoom out? Okay, so the Eightfold Path. Now, they're Pali words from the part of, the Buddha was probably speaking Magadha when he talked about this, but then eventually got written down in Pali, and then the Pali got written down and translated into Sanskrit, so that's going on. So sometimes these words won't quite, I feel as though there's no way on earth you could read that. I'm trying to do this. Oh, that worked. Okay. Is that a little bit better? Yeah. Really wish I could get rid of all this extra junk up here. There's usually a full screen doohickey over here. Isn't that funny? I'm not allowed to go there. Okay. Just can't do it today. There's such a thing as leaving well enough alone. Well, that has to be close enough. So, the Eightfold Path. Why is there a wheel in the slide? There's even looks like a ship's wheel thing on the podium over there. This is a Dharma Chakra. Chakra means wheel in Pali, so the Dharma Chakra is the Dharma wheel. It is the closest thing to a symbol that Buddhists have. I mean, you see Buddhists with a necklace or maybe a dangle on their ninju that has this Eightfold Path wheel. And it has 8 spokes. The Buddha referred to the spokes as limbs because in the old days when you made a wheel, what did you use for the sticks? You used limbs, good tree limbs that were pretty straight. You didn't have to, mill wood out of a big tree. You could just make a wheel. So, the wheel has lots of wonderful resonances with Buddhism. The word dukkha means a not quite right wheel. So it's interesting that the Buddha picked a wheel as a useful symbol for Buddhism. He didn't really say it was a symbol for Buddhism. It's a reminder, a mnemonic device, a physical device to remember the Eightfold Path. But the other neat thing about a wheel is that the way the spokes work, I used to be kind of an engineer, so you got to understand. Some of the spokes are in compression, so they're holding the weight of the wagon. But then the other spokes are in tension, and they're holding to keep the center of the wheel from falling the other way. So, if you only had the bottom spokes, it just wouldn't work very well. What is that? It's a dynamic interrelationship of these factors. So the spokes are factors, and they dynamically, the one in tension becomes the one in compression, the one in tension becomes, that's the way it goes as it rolls onward. And then the wheel as a symbol, circles wheels have a dynamism, right? They're going somewhere, they're rolling. Obviously, if they're static, they're not doing anything, but that's not, static wheels are posts. That's not interesting. The interesting thing about a wheel is that it can roll, that it has that kind of dynamic feel. Now, I can't explain why it has the little projections out here, like a ship's wheel. I don't understand. Nobody made a wagon wheel with things sticking out of it. That would be silly. It would go tung, 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 tung. So, so we always seem to start and go in this order, but it's important before we start talking about the different 8 folds of the path, or the 8 spokes of the wheel, or the 8 limbs of the Eightfold Path, to say that we don't mean them in a particular order. We actually mean them all at the same time. Like they only work all at the same time. But our little Aristotelian trained Western brains have to have everything separated out into a little pigeonhole, right? So we'll do that. That's fine. But they all relate to each other. So the first one, okay, then we got the word right. Okay, so the word right. If you've heard the Eightfold Path described, there's right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, and 3 more. But I just said right. Sounding kind of, Bible thumpy fundamentalist with all this right stuff, So we don't mean it that way. We mean just right. That's what we mean. So samma is the word in Pali. And samma, when the Buddha tried to explain what he meant by right understanding, the word samma, the word right, he said it's like a guitar. When you try to find a note on your guitar, and you pluck the string, it makes a sound. Now, if it's too tight, it will make an unpleasant sound. And if it's too loose, it will make no sound at all. It'll just go, if you've ever played with a guitar. So when to hit the note, and even as you've seen people tuning a guitar, they'll hit the note over and over again, and then look at this little needle on this meter. No, that's modern people. No. They don't even... You're supposed to use your ear and hear the resonant relationship to the string above it or something like that. I was taught one time how to tune a guitar. The just right moment, when the note is perfectly, I want to say on pitch, but someone who's musical, please help me out because I might be using the wrong word. And then it passes that. And then you turn what's the turny thing on the guitar? Anyone? We have no musicians? Yeah, so when you tighten the string and loosen the thing, turny thing, thank you. So when you turn that, you can feel it go, bong, 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 bong. Oh, great, you're turning that little thing and plucking the string at the same time. I'll drop something if I try to actually have the air guitar that we all know and love. So the Buddha was trying to say that all of these factors have a just right, perfectly tuned point. And that perfectly tuned aspect of understanding, so the first one, you can't really see it because it's really small, but is right understanding. We have different mnemonics. We until, well, okay, I won't get into that. Right understanding. If you think everything lasts forever, the Buddhists feel that is a wrong view, and that's a very extreme view. And then if you say that nothing exists, that's an annihilationist view, and that's an extreme view, and here's 2 sides, very extreme views. Sorry, I have to talk with my hands. So we have these 2 views. Buddhism is in here. And he kind of says that things exist, but they're changeful. So that's this interesting, so when we're tuning our guitar, it could be way over here wrapped, maybe this is super tight, everything lasts forever, and then we kind of dum, 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 and then we get right here to the middle, and that's where it's just tuned just right. So when we talk about the Eightfold Path, each one of these factors, think of the possibility of having it just tuned in just right. Now, the other wheel-like thing about this is it depends. It depends on all the other causes and conditions, what's just right. So I think with musical instruments, it is the same thing, that just because you tune the guitar in San Francisco and then you bring it to Reno and you strum it, it will not be in tune anymore because other causes and conditions, humidity and air pressure and all those things, have changed, and even the temperature matters. The strings change because they're warm or not warm. All those things change. So that dynamic aspect, the constant re-correcting is an important part of things being just right. Have you ever tried to get some aspect of your life just right? People are nodding their heads. Tell me one of the aspects you had just right. Just shout it out, it's fine. Cleaning your house. Raising your children. That's a big thing to get just right, but okay. Exercise. Oh, okay. So, right, those things, yeah. So, of all those things, I'm going to pick exercise as a good example. If I go to the gym and I meet with the trainer person and they say, well, you should use this machine, this machine, this machine, and use these weights and lift this much weight and it will tone your muscles. Okay, that sounds great. But a month later, if you do that exact thing, it'll be just a snore. Your body has adapted to those challenges, and they're not really challenging anymore, and it's not really a workout anymore. So then they say, well, no, after a month, then you add 10 sets of everything, and it goes from there. Eventually, you're just working out all day long. No, that's not reasonable, but you can always, you have to adapt it because you change in the process of exercising. That's kind of the whole point of it, right? So that feeling of just right, even cleaning your house. If you spent all your time cleaning your house, that would not be just right. That would be crazy. So don't do that. Clean it till it's tidy and there's no vermin, and then go on with your life. And then when it seems a little untidy, then then we work on it a little bit. It never is done. So the same thing with all these Eightfold Path aspects. It's never done. They're all works in progress. You can kind of feel better at tuning it, and then usually just about the point where you have it exactly right, like raising your kids, you've got these great 13-year-olds in middle school, and then they go to high school. And everything you had just right goes out the window because the challenges and opportunities and whatever of high school are so different than what your middle schooler had that it can easily fall apart completely, and you really you worry and wonder what happened. I had this all squared away. Well, life has many bumps in the road, and that's natural. So we adapt and adjust, and eventually they learn to drive and they get their own apartment and they get married and they have kids. It's amazing. Okay, so the wheel has 8 limbs. There are these limbs here. So we were talking about right understanding, sometimes translated as right view. And the things I would mention that are important about that, Amida Buddha is a wise, compassionate Buddha. Wisdom and compassion in the Dharmakaya is Amida Buddha. So part of a right view would be to recognize that through all of this, however difficult today may be, there are wonderful days too, and that is because there is a compassionate aspect to the universe around us that really, if you look objectively, has been caring for you as long as you can remember in little ways that you never really paid for, you never did it so that you could get it. There was no exchange. The universe has just been taking care of you because you're part of it. I don't really put any extra effort into taking care of this finger. It's part of me. It benefits from all the other things I do to care for the whole being. And so it should be grateful. No. Okay. Accepting our limitations, seeing part of right view is recognizing that I am a small piece of a big universe, and I'm largely deluded with misunderstanding of me as a separate thing, and that causes challenges and problems. I accept that. Our founder of our lineage, Shinran Shonin, was big on this part. Bombu nature, bombu kind of means goofball. It doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean wonderful. It's this kind of goofy, weird, how you try to do things just right, and then all of a sudden you do some stupid thing, or you say something to somebody, you don't answer the right way to a certain question, and then, in a relationship, and, does this djembe make me look fat? There is a right answer to that. And the honest answer may not be the right answer in that context and situation. So, but every once in a while we will all blurt, yeah, it does. And you're not supposed to say that, and then you can get into lots of trouble with your friend. Seeing everything as interwoven and interdependent is an important part of right understanding. If we think things are separate, then really none of this is going to work very well, because that's not a fundamental principle of Buddhism. Recognizing that bumps in the road happen, and yet also, if you really look at it, there's lots of wonderful things that occur too. So these are bumps in the road, and these are wonderful things, and that's why I'm waving my hand like this. So, right understanding. It includes the fundamental ideas of anicca, anatta, kind of the doctrine things of Buddhism. A right understanding needs to kind of have, at first, an empty file folder in the mind for that category. Like, what is non-self? You don't need to know what non-self is. You need to just have the thought in your mind that non-self is something, and I should probably learn about it. And that's that kind of openness and curiosity is where we start. And quite frankly, I continue to be in about that state. And it's been a lot of years. I've been involved with Buddhism, studied Buddhism, traveled to places where Buddhism was intensely vibrant so that I could learn about it, and I'm still kind of puzzling over what is this non-self thing we're talking about. But that's good. That's what the Buddha wanted us to do. So, right understanding. And then the next one, right thought. Sometimes described as right intention, but what would a just right thought be? See, that's interesting, because if you think that those bastards are all out to get me, which is basically my father's view of real estate, that's not a skillful way of looking at the universe. It will put you in antagonism with every realtor you talk to, and chances are the deals won't really work out so great. Which is pretty much what happened. I mean, never nothing bad ever happened, but it was always this kind of weird underlying feeling that we were getting ripped off by this deal or that deal. He was an engineer and he didn't really like real estate, so that's why he felt that way. But recognizing that our thoughts shape reality is important. So if I think, I don't want to bag on realtors, I pronounce that in a strange way. So let's find some other profession. Car salespeople, right? Okay, if they're selling cars, they can do it in a nice way or not nice way. If I immediately think they're trying to rip me off as soon as I walk into the car dealership, it's just not going to work out that well. It's contorted things. It isn't open to the possibility that this person actually knows a lot about cars, wants to find out about me, and then put me into a vehicle that is, appropriate, affordable, that kind of thing. Because I've pre-distorted, biased my thought. No, but that happens to all of us all the time. And trying to see that and recognize that is important. Now, cultivating thoughts is an interesting idea. It turns out that we are completely capable of, what do they say, neuroplasticity. We can change the way we think about things by thinking about them differently. That sounds sort of circular. But if simple conflicts, like you're parking your car and you know how there's a spot right there and you're kind of moving toward that spot and you have a blinker on, and then that person in the red Miata goes around you into the spot. This is a frustrating occurrence. It has probably happened to all of us. You have some choices at that point. The idea of cultivating positive or skillful thoughts is, at that moment, as soon as you think, come on, you have that clutching feeling. There's a body feeling first, really, and then you kind of perceive that body feeling, and then the thought constructs start coming in. You want to say a bad name for the person. You want to yell at them. You want to honk your horn. You had that choice. At that point, you could say, wow, they probably need to get where they're going. I'll find another parking place. Now you just saved yourself from all the mental anguish of cursing them out. But just thinking the curse out, I mean, obviously we don't usually scream it out the window. Some people do, and that's a big problem. But if you just think it, it's still a problem. And it will put you on an unfortunate path if you keep thinking it. So this is actually karma. It's an action. Thoughts in Buddhism are considered actions. So karmic actions are actions of body, speech, or mind. Body, speech, or mind. Backwards from the order I'm doing right now, but okay. So right thought also includes within it just right thought, thinking about the Dharma sometimes. There are people who come to the temple of a Sunday and they talk with their friends and they're attentive through the Dharma talk, and then they wander off and they never actually think about, like, who was this Buddha person and why did they tell us this? And when they get in a situation where that Miata cuts them off and steals their parking spot, they still cuss them out and it's no big deal. Well, wait a second. We just were talking about how that maybe isn't the most skillful way to approach life. Apply it in your life. Ask questions about it, be curious about it. Now, all of you don't have this problem. I guarantee it, because you sacrificed your Saturday morning when you could easily be doing a lot of other things, more fun things, more important things, more useful things. The laundry is really important and useful, and you're not doing it. You came here, and that has to do with studying the Dharma and in carving out the time to do that. Renyo, behind, I'm pointing over my shoulder kind of badly, but anyway, Renyo, the second picture down, we consider the second founder of Shin Buddhist lineage. His point was, just come to the temple regularly and you will experience Dharma stuff. And after the Dharma talk and the service, if you sit with your friends and have some rice and sake, because in Japan, they don't really have a big hang-up about drinking sake at the temple. The Puritans affected us, so we do. But anyway, and talk about it. Say, well, that was interesting. Does it really mean that everything is joyful even if you're not happy? That's weird. Have the conversation. So that's all right thought. So I hinted at it with our Miata incident, but speech, just right speech. What would just right speech be like? Some people have tried or practiced speaking without using the word I, me, my, or any other personal pronoun thing. So they and I can't do it, but obviously. It's quite difficult, the way language is constructed, to not do that and to not sound like a weirdo. But if you approach things without those personalizations, you experience them differently. But we can do it verbally, and that's an interesting practice. Even just toning it down a little bit is useful. So in the Miata incident, for instance, that bastard stole my parking place. Well, okay, we can take out that bastard because it's a big waste of time, because you don't know them. It's just somebody driving a red Miata. Stole my parking place. Was it really your parking place? It wasn't really your parking place. In your mind, you had projected forward in the future and taken possession of it to be part of I, me, and my. But it was just a space in the universe, some three-dimensional space about the size of a Miata. So it wasn't your parking place in the first place. That's just selfish construct coming in. If we say those things, then that's a bigger action. And if I yell that out the window at the person in the Miata, and they are armed, it could get really bad really fast. And, in some societies, well, that isn't really true. Japan seems like a very polite society, but every once in a while, somebody in the Miata will cut off a truck. I've only seen this once, but an actual conflict occurs with the vehicles, and maybe they actually cut off the truck, get hit, and you have an accident. I've seen the truck driver with that thumper thing they use to check the tires with. It looks like a little billy club or a small baseball bat in his hand, and the driver that offended him kneeling down on the ground, and no harm comes to him. If the driver stands up and fights, then there will be a fight. But there's a certain rule of submitting to that you did something wrong. And okay, that has escalated to a physical fight. it starts out with words. If we can nip it in the thought and just don't say it, that's great. If we say it, we can say, ooh, sorry, I didn't mean that. I'm having a terrible day. You can kind of verbally plaster over that kind of verbal error. And this is an extreme example, but it's always easier to talk in extreme examples, and subtle examples are much more difficult. So we can turn conflict into harmony. Wow, I didn't see you there. I was thinking about my wife's doctor's appointment, and I just saw an empty parking place, and I drove into it, And usually that's enough to just kind of plaster over and even out. The other person says, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Okay, and then peace can intervene. So our speech is a karmic action. It matters. Habits of speech matter. If you read lots of sailor books, your speech will be peppered with swear words. I wouldn't recommend it. It's probably better to do the opposite. There's some rules, some lineages of Tibetan Buddhism have the specific rule that the priests are not allowed to watch any movies except Disney movies, with the theory that they're pretty benign. I mean, the kids' ones, not the modern Disney movies with the... they're pretty benign, they have simple themes, they're happy, it's okay. But don't go nuts. Don't go too far into the world of Hollywood. So experiencing speech both as listening to and saying it, those are two aspects of speech. Talking about the temple is a part of right speech. If we mention the temple exists, then someone else might say, well, I was always interested in Buddhism. You go there? And it strikes up a conversation. So I always put that in there because word of mouth is important. So then, kind of lost the word action there, but right action. Obviously, in the analogy of the Miata, if we get into physical conflict with somebody, that is physical action. But there's all kinds of other actions we do. Most of the time, we go about our life and we think we're acting responsibly. That's important. But if you notice that the first one is consume with self-control. If you notice, taking out the trash and you throw the trash bag in the trash can, it makes a clinking sound like Jack Daniel's bottles smashing against each other. Wow, that was really loud. Usually, every week somebody throws away a few bottles. But if this entire bag is full of bottles, I once worked in a salmon cannery in Alaska, and half the cannery was Japanese workers, and half of them were Americans. And the Japanese had a separate dormitory, and their trash can, literally, it's a 50-gallon drum, and it was full of vodka, whiskey, gin, whatever bottles. Every morning, I took out the trash. Every morning. I couldn't believe that they could live, and they didn't just die from consuming that much alcohol. An extreme example, but we can notice what we're consuming and say, well, I could probably do better with that. This is over the top. This is too much chocolate cake. Okay. And the Buddha's not saying you can never have a piece of chocolate cake. The Buddha's kind of saying, take it easy. Find that middle point where you deserve it, and yet it's not an indulgence. And I'm never going to have another piece of chocolate cake. That's kind of harsh. And that's if this is the middle, that's over here on the too harsh side, and then piece of chocolate cake with every meal, dessert after breakfast of chocolate cake. That's too much indulgence. We're trying to find some middle. Yes?
Could you go a little more into indulgence?
So that's...
What's the question?
So the question is, what do I mean by indulgence, or how do we gauge that?
How does it relate to the wanting and the thirsting?
Right. So wanting and thirsting is the problem. Well, it's interesting because it turns out, if you study this sort of thing, people who have lots of stuff want more stuff. Have you ever noticed how athletes that get, who grow up in a middle-class family, all of a sudden have millions of dollars, and then they run out of money in like a year? How'd that happen? It cost $40,000 a year for them to live before, and now they have $10 million, and they're out of money. What happened? The more stuff you have, the more you want. And so the wanting and thirsting that causes dukkha is increased the more you want and thirst. Sort of the more you get, the more you want is what it comes down to. I talked about this before, that people who don't have enough are quite unhappy. People who have pretty much enough are quite happy. It turns out people who have more than enough aren't as happy as the people who had just about right. So that's a scientific indication that there's a middle way there. It's dynamic. It depends on our situation, who we are. If I was a Japanese salmon cannery worker, I wouldn't drink the whole bottle of whiskey every night. Okay, and by toning it down, they might feel better in the morning. There's a lot of other ancillary effects of overindulgence, but the Buddha was very specific. He tried, he grew up as a prince, so that was totally indulgent. That last day in the palace, when everybody's passed at the end of the night, the end of the party, everybody's passed out and there's spittle dripping out of their mouths and places, and he can't stand it. So then he goes the other opposite extreme. I mean, at one point, his teacher teaches him that your body is impure, and if you don't eat or drink things from this world, then your spiritual self will be stronger. Well, that just almost killed him. So it's actually a kind of indulgence, but it's indulgence in self-mortification. So we have to balance that. As Americans, it's easy, not so many pieces of chocolate cake. We can always dial back toward away from consumption, and that's probably the right direction, just because our culture is so amazingly indulgent in every aspect. But you should never. But also, you shouldn't be harsh to yourself. So that's a puzzling in between. So that's the wonderful thing about the middle way is every time it's a dynamic correction. Dr. Matsunaga, my teacher, used to say it's a dynamic middle that you're finding. So the middle's different all the time. You just got to pay attention. So there's a thing. These 5 precepts are common in Buddhism. So I will practice love, I will refrain from killing. That's the first one. I will practice generosity, I will refrain from stealing. That's the second one. I will practice contentment, I will refrain from exploiting my sensuality. That's the third one. I will practice mindful speech, I will refrain from harmful speech. That's the fourth one. And the fifth one is, I will practice mindful consumption, I will refrain from intoxication and harmful substances that harm myself, society, and the environment. So those 5 precepts in Sri Lanka, where I studied, it was just wonderful to go there and study, because it was the first time I was ever in a place where pretty much almost everybody was a Buddhist. I think there's 12% Hindu people there and 0.5% of Christian people in Sri Lanka. So really everybody you run into is probably a Buddhist. It was great because I had studied Buddhism in the university, and people write books about the interesting part of Buddhism, which is a special monk goes to the top of a mountain, lives in a cave, and seeks enlightenment. That's interesting. You can write a book about that. Mom lives at home in a village and makes dinner for the kids and takes care of things, keeps the household running. You don't write a book about that. That's not that interesting. But it turns out almost every Buddhist in the whole country, whole world, and the whole country of Sri Lanka, that's what their life is like. So regular life can be lived along these 5 precepts. Now, as people get more interested in spirituality and Buddhism, you can take the 10 precepts, and that starts I haven't memorized them, but they're more specific, they're kind of vows to yourself or guidelines you want to follow. These aren't commandments. You're not going to hell if you steal something, but it's going to have a karmic effect. And the whole way the Eightfold Path works is you get in the habit of living in this wholesome way, and then things get better, and then eventually you can see clearly that when I said it was my parking place, it wasn't really my parking place. And you really kind of know that. Or maybe you don't even experience the feeling of a loss when the Miata parks there. It's like, oh, no, next one? Oh, there's one. It just doesn't even happen. So you get to save all that mental anguish and energy if you get in the habit of following the Eightfold Path. So these 5 precepts are useful, interesting. We all transgress them from time to time. It's easy to say, well, I've never killed anything. I was like, okay, wait a second. You've never killed another person? That's probably likely. That's good. But if you were in the Air Force and you fueled up jets, the Buddha isn't saying you're going to hell because you fueled jets. In the context of countries and their activities, armies and force are part of that. So that's not a wrong, we'll get to right livelihood next, but that's not necessarily bad. Now, if you were seething with anger in a bar fight and just smashed someone's head against the table until they died, that is the thing not to do. That is murder, and that will just terribly tear up your consciousness karmically, and you'll be feeling the fruits of that for a long time. So you don't do that. But then you can say, well, killing what? Living things? Well, we kill living things every day. We're all responsible for killing living things every day. And then somebody said, well, I'm a vegan. Like, oh, okay, well, you're only killing plants. But they're living, and you're killing them, and you're consuming them. That's one way of looking at it. Mostly, let's just look at this from the, harming other humans is the first thing the Buddha was talking about here. And then there's no requirement to vegetarianism or veganism or plant-based, as we like to say nowadays. In Buddhism, if you feel as though you'd rather not harm the chickens, don't, then don't. And if you think they're quite tasty and you really appreciate their tastiness, well, maybe you're appreciating the chickens well enough that you can consume them without having a karmic stain that's going to hurt your heart down the road. It's situational. It's a little bit squishy. But so the same kind of analysis would be possible for each one of these 5 precepts. But in terms of framing what is right action, that's a very clear list the Buddha gave us to say, well, try to go along these guidelines. Now, some parts of Buddhism, the last one is kind of interesting. I will practice mindful consumption and refrain from intoxication. In the actual Pali, it says, I won't consume something, and I won't consume something. But we don't know what those words mean. We think they're probably intoxicants of some kind. It's not, and there was a word in Pali for alcohol, and it's not that word. So there's different interpretations of that. From our lineage, we generally say, don't get intoxicated. Now, it makes sense because once you get intoxicated, big problems occur. And those are hard things to walk back because the chances of you thinking a wrong thought, saying something, and then hurting someone or getting into physical, if you're intoxicated, is just much more likely. If you're intoxicated and you drive a vehicle, it's very likely you will damage something or someone. So that's kind of how we talk it. Some aspects of Buddhism are absolutely abstinent from alcohol. And then you say, well, can you have red wine vinegar? They say, yeah, sure. It's like, well, okay. But that has wine in it. There is alcohol molecules in red wine vinegar. They don't, even root beer has a little tiny bit of alcohol in it. So the Buddha tried to avoid absolutist thinking and tried to encourage people to think on the basis of reasonable values. So that's a way to look at right action. So then, the next piece makes sense. The largest action in our life is livelihood, right livelihood. So the way I like to say it is, if your job is tearing you apart, and it hurts you every day, that's not a right livelihood. If you're and you can with any car sales people here today, okay, good. There may be some watching the streaming, but okay. Not that profession is inherently problematic. Every profession kind of has the opportunity to be problematic or not. A wrong livelihood. If I wanted to be a Buddhist priest so that I could talk to people and tell them what to think, this would be a wrong livelihood. I would be hurting myself and others through what I was doing for a living. my motivation is not along those lines. I generally think that I'm just saying to you what Matsunaga would say to you if he was sitting on his stool, because he used to sit here and do this. I'm a kind of pale echo of what he said, but at least I'm here, and I'm sharing this with you, and it might plant a seed, and you might pick up a book, and all these things will roll onward, and that will be positive, turning the wheel of Dharma in a tiny little way. So that's what I think my motivation is. But there are certainly people who enjoy the power of it all and like telling people what to do. And we've all probably run into priests like that. And usually it's best when they start asking for money to put your hand on your wallet and then walk backward toward the door and then leave. Because somebody's going to get ripped off in that exchange. That you may end up with a beautiful crystal cathedral or whatever, helicopters, Learjets, But those folks are, I think that's kind of a definition of wrong livelihood, where maybe for some I, me, my personal thirsting, wanting reason, they've gotten into the job instead of trying to be helpful and productive and part of the world. So every job can be evaluated that way, and I also want to say I'm not encouraging you to quit your job tomorrow, though it seems like a lot of people are doing that lately. So there are also a lot of opportunities available. Reflecting on it, thinking about how the way that you're viewing your job, the way you're approaching it, and how that is affecting you, that is important. And coming to the evaluation, the reflection that this livelihood is wholesome and useful, and I can continue doing it without harming myself or others, then that becomes right livelihood. Of the Eightfold Path, right livelihood is kind of the least interesting one. It seems so obvious, but it's in here. I mean, if there were 7 spokes of the wheel, it wouldn't be quite the same. I seem to have a wire problem here. I'm sitting on my mic wire. Okay, so the next one is right effort. Remember, just right effort. So we have a little picture here, and there's a snail, and he's going up to the top of, looks like a sand dune. Let's call it a sand dune. It really looks like snow, but why would a snail be going up snow? There's a poem, a haiku. I can't quite remember it. It's like, guru, guru, guru. I'll say it in English now. Little snail climbs Mount Fuji. I have literally seen a slug climbing Mount Fuji, and I thought of that koan, that haiku. I mean, it's just a slug, and I was on Mount Fuji, and I looked down, and it was going up Mount Fuji, but putting in right effort, like a little snail trying to get to the top of Mount Fuji, you can see the proportions there between the size of the mountain and the size of a snail, with snails in this story, so we have to put effort in. We have to go to the trouble of at least reflection after we think something, to think, well, that was a little harsh. But maybe you can get ahead of it and approach the thoughts in a way, recognizing they're malleable and recognizing you can move them in a wholesome way just by habit, and just skip over the harsh stuff and go to the kind stuff. And this totally applies to thoughts about ourselves too, because a lot of people have harsh thoughts about themselves, and that's just as unhelpful as having harsh thoughts about the person in the Miata. Putting in that effort regularly is important. And regularly taking refuge, the slide says, Renyo's point, just come to the temple. Get into some kind of habit of coming. It may be cleanup day, it may be Dharma book group, it may be a Sunday service, whatever it is. Come, interact, think about the Dharma. That putting in that effort and taking the time, which you have done today, is of great value in terms of spiritual growth. Even if you don't end up being a Buddhist for the rest of your life, it will be quite valuable. Even if you came because you're interested, well, what is this Buddhism 101? That seems like an introductory class. I'll try that. You come, you listen, and every time the priest says something, it's like, oh, this is stupid. Oh, this is ridiculous. Oh, maybe it's helping you clarify what you believe or what resonates for you. And that will help you seek out the next spiritual context, a place your relatives were all Greek that came here 100 years ago. Maybe I'll go over and see if Father Stephen Karcher at the Greek Orthodox is interesting. And maybe, that's fine. That's great. Or maybe you sit down and you feel like, wow, this feels like home. This makes sense to me. I want to be here. That happens too. The point is you're making the effort, and spiritual growth does require effort. Sometimes we use the word virya, which is kind of energy. You can't, it's hard to sleep through it and really get anything out of it. I am sitting on my mic cord. Okay. Guarding the mind, habituating in the good direction of wholesome thoughts and actions is part of right effort. Right mindfulness, we've all heard about mindfulness. There's even a magazine that they sell at Whole Foods. It's Mindfulness Magazine. I probably said this before because I say it all the time. But if you look in that magazine, they never mention the Buddha. It really irks me because they're trading on a tradition that existed before them and making money off it and then not really even attributing it at all. But a lot of modern psychology has been doing that, so I'll just end that thought right there because I can see that it's not going in a good direction, see? So mindfulness. The Nembutsu, this idea here, Namu Amida Butsu, I take refuge in the wise, compassionate universe. I take refuge in Amida Buddha. Nen means bringing to mind. Butsu means Buddha. So bringing to mind the Buddha is mindfulness of the Buddha. So that's our fundamental practice in Shin Buddhism. We don't like saying it's a practice because it's very self-power oriented, but it's a thing we do that's in tune with the calling of this compassionate universe. Because really the universe is calling out to us. We kind of have like the monkeys with the hands over the ears and mouth and eyes. We're kind of the monkey with the hands over the ears. We're not listening, but the universe is trying to reach us in every different way it can, not to overly personify it, but deep hearing of that light is important. And we can do that if we go for a walk. We can do that sitting in traditional cross-legged meditation, like a zazen kind of meditation. There's all kinds of ways we can cultivate mindfulness. Every day, practicing deep hearing is probably most accessible because no matter what we're doing, even if we're driving a car or working or chopping carrots, there's opportunities for mindfulness. Feeling what's going on in ourself, in our emotional state, what's going on physically in the universe around us, we can be mindful of that. And when we are, then all these other aspects of the Eightfold Path become more possible. If we're mindful of our views, then when we get in a situation where we're yelling at those bad people, we can say, well, wait a second. I mean, are they really bad people? Maybe they think something different than I do. And maybe I sound just as harsh to them as they do to me. Wait a second. With that kind of mindful of that conversation happening, it protects you from hideous self-righteousness, which is pretty hideous. Practicing deep hearing. Yeah, self-awareness, reflection, those are all parts of mindfulness. Now, the basic techniques of mindfulness, just making a cup of tea and interacting with the sounds and smells and actions of making a cup of tea and leaving all the other stuff away for that part of your morning. It may only take 3 minutes to make a cup of tea, but just doing that will cultivate the ability to be aware of right now in your life. And really right now is the only place in your life. The past it's already happened. Right now is real and happening. And what might happen in the future, I might get the parking place. You can think about those things. I'm not saying don't plan, but on the other hand, hitching all your emotional wagon to something that might happen 10 years from now is probably silly. Have a loose plan, but it's adaptable and it can change and be open to possibilities. That's the mindfulness brings us back to the present moment in many ways. Because If you want to appreciate the wise, compassionate character of the universe, it is available to us right now. Little memories and worries, and it's going to be less, those are all mental constructs. But what is happening right now is immediately accessible to us through mindfulness. So, the eighth fold of the Eightfold Path is Samadi. So, quietude is the word I find is best to translate that. Inside ourselves, there's a lot going on, and a lot of forms of meditation are intended to get us past that, so that we're not just listening to our own dialogue about, oh, I'm sitting here and my butt kind of hurts, and I think is my ankle kind of, all these things are going on while I'm talking to you, right? If I think about all that stuff, I lose the fact that we are here together, considering the Dharma, in this wonderful right now moment. Now, this is precious, but I won't even experience its preciousness if I don't quiet all that other stuff. In beginner meditation on Sunday mornings at 9 for the Sunday service at 10, we talk about this, and just getting quiet and not having too much commentary going on in our mind is of great value. And really what happens is people think that it's a process of closing out, of not noticing everything around you, but it's the absolute opposite of that. Once this chitter-chatter, monkey mind stuff can fall away, everything opens and it becomes brighter, more vibrant, more engaging. Your curiosity is just kind of blossoms. But you don't have to be there. I don't have to be there for that happens. It turns out that the less I is there, the more vibrant and engaging life is around us. So that's an aspect of quietude. Taking time to see, just to quietly just listen to the world around us is important. And that may mean not talking for a while, and that's okay. Often when people start trying meditation, they are frustrated or it feels uncomfortable because it's so quiet. Who sits in a room with other people for 20 minutes and with nobody saying anything? In our culture, almost no one. It doesn't happen. So when you do that, your experience of life, it becomes different. And it doesn't mean you turn into a zombie, or you're not going to go crazy, your self isn't going to go off. It'll be okay. It's just better. So that's what the Buddha is teaching us. Quietly experiencing reality as it is what the Buddha does all the time, because the Buddha is enlightened. We're not enlightened. And yet, we all have the seed, the Buddha nature inside us. So we do actually experience life just like the Buddha experienced it every once in a while, in little glimpses. And opening to those glimpses, and maybe those glimpses get more sustained. And at first, it's just a little flash, but then over time, you're on the whole hike and you haven't said a word to your friend, and you're just experiencing the world around us and nature, and it feels really good. And you haven't even thought about, I feel good. It's just joyful feeling happening. That's wonderful, and that's possible for all of us. So if we follow this Eightfold Path, we have made it through all four noble truths. So, does that bring up any questions? Yes?
Are they in any particular order?
So it's interesting. They're in the traditional order, but they don't happen in any particular order. I would say the reason we start with right understanding is it's so fundamental. But it doesn't mean you could start implementing in your life right action as a starting point, because actions are pretty large and gross and easy to control. Thoughts are subtle, So in a way, they're easy to control, but in a way, they're not, because they can happen all of a sudden. And, so in implementation, we just start wherever we start, and we know that all the different spokes of the wheel interrelate. So if I'm trying to experience life with right speech, right effort is right there, naturally. So, but this is the traditional series. It is not. We have lots of AA meetings at the temple every day at 8 o'clock in the morning, and that is a 12-step system. And the first step is the first step, and the third step is the third step, and you cannot skip from the first step to the third step. You need to do the second step. So that is a different type of system than the Buddha was offering. They're all aspects, and that's why the wheel is the symbol of it. Someone had another question.
Do you have any practice for right intention?
Well, sure. It's, a lot of times just the sustained, applying right effort, the control flows from awareness. Okay, that's a little thing a teacher taught me once. So if we don't notice something, we certainly can't affect it. And if we start to notice that, through this whole pandemic thing, I've just gotten more enervated and I'm more frustrated with other people. And that's coming out in my thoughts. So last night there was a drunk staggering and then he kind of fell down and out in front of the temple. I was walking the dogs. And he was crawling down the sidewalk. And I did have harsh thought, like, please don't barf on the sidewalk because I'm going to have to clean it up, But I didn't engage anything. You never know with a drunk. So there's some, maybe over through the pandemic, I've noticed that has kind of come up more because it's just been a tense time for everybody. Everybody's afraid a little more. Not seeing each other's faces is really bad because we don't know if we're connecting or not. Noticing that, and then actively injecting the thought, I hope he's okay. I hope, and then I worry for him that what's going on in his life that you get so drunk that you're crawling down the sidewalk in Midtown. Something, And I did think about calling authorities to help him, but it was no clear, it wasn't injured. I couldn't call an ambulance. I wasn't doing anything wrong, so I didn't need to call the police because usually that can go the wrong way. So my thinking was just give him space. We'll deal with it in the morning, and once the hose thaws out, I will go hose down the lawn, and everything will be fine. So, did that sort of give a practice? Yeah. I think in Shin Buddhism, it does this a lot because it's regular Buddhism for regular people as opposed to special people who don't have life to take care of. You can implement the Nembutsu, taking refuge in Amida Buddha, any time in your life. One of the reasons it was very popular in Japan in the Middle Ages was people had to work from before dawn to after the sun went down every day to survive. And then if anything got in the way, then survival was at risk. In Japan at the time, there were lots of civil war things, so it was just kind of terrible all the time for regular people. But even if you were a coal miner, and coal miner, 800 years ago, that's a tough job. It's hard now, but unbelievably hard. You could still say the Nembutsu with every time you hit the pick against the coal face. And people did. There's stories about it. The Myokonin people, kind of wonderful people. And that cultivates a sense of the compassionate universe around you. You don't have to, you can just feel that feeling with whatever you're doing. Implementing these Buddhist aspects, practices in regular life is really how it works. Even in the Zen context, the Dogen talks about how the person in the kitchen is really is practicing the best. The people who are sitting on their mats are kind of they're practicing spiritual materialism. I'm really good at meditating. The cook, who is one of the priests in the temple, but he can't sit on the cushion because everybody else needs to eat. If he's cutting the carrots in beautiful, perfect mindfulness, that's great. That's a better practice than the artificial practice of sitting on a cushion in this one thing Dogen wrote that I'm thinking of. So implementing those practices in regular life is a good way to do it. A good way to change that. Control flows from awareness. Awareness starts, and then we can affect it. Control. Sounds a little draconian, but you affect things. Just slowly steer. So we usually have a human comfort break, but this is our last session. We only have a half hour left. So if you need to take a moment, please just drift away down the hall and come back. And we're not going to stop. I'm just going to keep going, if that's okay. So, okay. We talked a little bit about practice. We talked about meditation a bit, and that calm abiding idea. And newcomers, if you're new and you'd like to try that out, come to at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. We have beginner's meditation downstairs. There's some flags will be out, and check it out. Try it out. So we chant a lot. Every Tuesday at 6 we have chanting practice, and that's another thing to try. The nice thing about chanting, and the reason chanting is a much more popular practice in Buddhism than meditation, is that you're occupied. Meditations where there is nothing to occupy you except you thinking about if you're doing it right or not can be non-productive. So for most people who have lots of stuff to think about because they're living life in the regular world, and that's separate from people who live like in a monastery or some enclosed institution, by chanting something, you can kind of tune into that. You can experience non-duality, non-separation, because everybody's chanting together. About one thing about spiritual friendship, I was reading, and they said that people in choirs tend to get to be better friends with other people than people in other kinds of groups. So there's something about just that harmonious quality that you naturally entrain with everyone else that's useful and wonderful about chanting. So that's a practice you can try. Namu Amida Butsu is our basic chant. It can be abbreviated to Namandabu. Neat thing about Japanese is you can say a word, the whole word, or you can just make one syllable out of it, and they do that all the time. Things get abbreviated a lot. We can try it on Tuesday because I'm trying to finish the class. Okay. Okay. Of the ideas we didn't talk about, karma is one of them. We've all heard of karma. Is this true? I have taught this class probably 26 times. So in this class together, we have not talked about karma, right? Just a little bit. Did we do this whole thing with the... Okay. So karma means action of body, speech, and mind. So that's a different definition than the normal American definition of action, because thinking something in terms of the penal code is, well, soon it will be illegal to think things, but right now it's an action. So we might think of karma like this. Okay, so there's kind of a person on the ground, a mean person about to kick the person on the ground, and then kind of a sky monster that's about to flick the person who's kicking the other person. So basically, if you do something bad, some other powerful thing will get you. So often people think of karma that way. This has nothing to do with how we think of karma in Buddhism, barely anything to do with how we think of karma in Hinduism. But in American, there's T-shirts or memes about, karma kicks you in the butt and all this kind of stuff. It's more like this idea. So there's a guy sitting on a stool. He pushes a domino to his left, and those dominoes are going to fall, and eventually the one on the right is going to fall on his head. So maybe it's more like this, that causality is important to recognize, and that if we habitually think harsh thoughts, eventually the domino of thinking harsh thoughts will get us. We'll be on a pier in Santa Cruz looking for a spaghetti place to eat spaghetti, and there'll be some, this really happened to me, and there'll be some Hells Angels, and my friend from New Jersey will say something unfortunate, and he's from New Jersey, so he doesn't know that you really, really, really don't mess with Hells Angels because they can mess you up, and they will have no compunction about throwing you off the dock. My friend from New Jersey didn't know that, and he said, "Wow, you guys got neat bikes." And I was just, oh my God. He says, those are people you're just quiet around. It's not complicated. So because he didn't say anything bad, but he really, really should have not done that. And he was in the habit of just sort of blurting things out, and that was an unfortunate habit. So I don't know why I picked this story. It just came to me, and that's what happened. But nothing bad actually happened. I said sorry, and we wandered off, and I got some shrugs and gruff sounds, and we were okay. The point is, though, that if my friend from New Jersey was in the habit of cussing people out, and or correcting people's behaviors, and if one of the Hells Angels had parked their motorcycle tire on the sidewalk, which did occur, he could have said, you shouldn't park here. Larry, do you know they have a knife and a gun? Because they probably do. One of these four guys does. And anyway, that would be a big problem, right? So being in the habit of correcting people, Larry wouldn't know not to, and then karmically, it would have repercussions. That's one way of talking about it. Okay, so actions have results. Karma is our action. The results and those actions plant seeds, and the results we refer to as the fruit of karma. So if somebody breaks their leg, or if somebody did something bad, they kicked somebody, and then later they break their leg, and somebody says, "Oh, that's their karma." That's not really how we mean it. Their karma was kicking someone, and if you really think that's connected, the breaking of their leg would be the fruit of that karma. But we don't really think of it that way. So literally, positive actions plant positive seeds and have positive results in the grand scheme of everything. And because certainly there's certain actions that seem positive at the time, but then it turns out that you probably shouldn't have done that. This is a cute little, I almost had it. Can you see where it says seeds in green? Can you see that? I thought I was going to use Powtoon a lot, but it was really hard. It took me a day to make that thing. I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen. But the ideas that presented, though, that we're not talking about predetermination. So in Buddhism, the fact that in the present moment that we can experience in a wonderful, vibrant way, we have choices and we can take actions is a wonderful opportunity. It's not so much that it's a time where we get hit by the unfortunate fruit of our karma. It's a time that we can take new actions. If we start having wholesome thought and we start using wholesome action, then we're kind of steering the direction of our life in a new and wonderful, and we can do that right now. It's the right time. We don't have to do it later. That's the Buddhist sense of karma, to recognize that our actions have effect. So skillful actions, good actions are actions that move us toward the Dharma, toward harmonious kind of qualities, to what the Buddha taught. And then, we say bad karma, but we really mean unskillful actions that clearly, there's some pretty easy to guess unskillful actions that take us away from the Dharma into conflict and difficulty with other people. Having a sense that we have a measure of control is very essential, and also recognizing our limitations, that there are lots of things we don't have control over. That brings us to a middle way. Do you see how that works? If I had a philosophy that said, you have control of everything, and if you want a new car, you just close your eyes and think, new car, new car, new car, and you'll have one. And there are people who almost literally say that in their temple, not a Buddhist temple, but churches, whatever. That would be one extreme. And then saying, no, you just got to take it, you have no control over anything, that's the other extreme. The Buddha is saying it's kind of in between. You have a measure of control over many things in your life, but really, you got to recognize that you don't have control over everything, and now operate in the bandwidth you can operate in. So there's the story of the farmer and his son. It's the old days in China, 1,000 years ago, and there's this farmer, and his son's kind of lazy, and his son doesn't latch the gate on the corral. Any horse people here? Not today, but okay. That's not a good thing to do because the horse runs off. So now the farmer has no horse and a farm field and a plow. What's he going to do? So that was disappointing. So karmically, you could judge that the son's action is a bad action, right? Seemed pretty clear. This is a story, so you got to bear with me here. But a few days later, the horse comes back. Horses are smart, they know where they live, they know about the food, but he comes back with 3 other horses. And they actually walk into the corral, and the farmer's like, wow, closes the gate, thinks, wow. And he sort of realizes that on the one hand, he thought it was a bad thing, but now it's not a bad thing because these other horses just sort of turned up. Maybe they were wild and the tame horse brought them back. So the farmer's still a little annoyed with the son for letting the horse go in the first place, but it didn't work out so badly. So he tells the son, well, could you please train these other horses? I don't know if you've ever tried to ride a horse that has never been ridden before, but it's quite an exciting process. You kind of know what you're doing. And the son has been around horses to an extent, but not enough, and he was thrown from the horse. And he broke his leg. The leg heals, farmer trains the horses, things are going okay. But now his son has this funny limp thing, and so it kind of makes it so he can't really help the farmer anymore. So the farmer thinks, oh, maybe it was bad that he left the door open because then the horses came back and then he had to break the horses, and then when he broke the horses, he broke his leg, and now he's not that helpful. His son wasn't that helpful in the first place, but it's worse now. So, and all the other farmers have very helpful sons and daughters, and mine one is not so great, limping all the time, can't lift large objects and walk with them because of the broken leg. So now it seems like a bad thing, right? Pretty clear. There's a conflict all the time in ancient China. Warlord comes over the hill and says, I need more men. You've got a son, you got a son. No, I'm not going to take this kid, his leg's broken. And they go over the hill with all the sons in the village, and that warlord is not a very good warlord. The other warlord wipes them out. Everybody killed. So now our farmer is the only one who still has a son. And even though he has a broken leg, he loves his son, and everyone else is going through this terrible loss. So now the farmer thinks, well, it wasn't so bad that my son left the corral open and the horse left and the horse came back and he tried to break the new horses and he broke his leg and then he couldn't help me, but then the warlord didn't draft him and now I've got a son and nobody else does. So what we thought was bad is actually pretty good. It's gone along, it's a long story already, but there are a couple more folds of the story, but you get the idea. That when we're in it, it's very unclear what we should judge as good or bad. That's not how it works. We want to live life with mindfulness, make the best, most skillful choices we're able to do. And if we need to consult other people we respect, to make a big choice in life, that's a good thing to do. And then we go with that. And that will plant some seeds. And some of those seeds will probably be quite wonderful, and a few of them probably won't be, but we can't tell which is which down in real time. A Buddha is literally capable of seeing the karmic interconnections of actions forward and backward in time. It's another wonderful thing about Buddha, probably because they're tuned into the Dharmakaya. They can see how everything's interconnected, and therefore they can see how everything works. We can't do that. And it's a burden and a misunderstanding of Buddhism to think that we do. No. Because there's plenty of well-intentioned actions that turn out to be not, they have bad, or whatever you call it, unfortunate fruit that come from them. And then there's things that seem good, like I went and got some food and I gave it to somebody on the street corner who was begging for money, and I gave them food because I didn't want them to give them money, because then they would probably just buy whatever intoxicants they're intoxicated with, and that doesn't seem that helpful, so I got them a sandwich. But you got the wrong sandwich and they broke a tooth. Now they don't have a home, they don't have any food, they don't have any money for beer, and they have a broken tooth. Well, you did it because you wanted to feel good about yourself. You feel good about yourself, but in the sum total of everything, all the causes and conditions that flows into that moment ended up breaking a tooth. It would be fairly objective to say that didn't turn out so well for the person on the street corner. So that starts to suggest that interwoven web of karmic interactions that occur, just like the farmer and his son. Okay, any thoughts about karma before I move on? Yes?
Is everything the result of karma, or can you have like causes and conditions that didn't come from any past? Well, I guess that kind of answers itself.
That does interestingly answer itself. The most important aspect of karma is our spiritual life. So it's hard. As a fledgling teacher myself, I struggle to find good examples and ways to communicate, because if the most important aspect is karma, of karma is our spiritual life, and every example I've given has been some kind of physical world example that could have had perfectly objective causes, then I have to stipulate to you or help you see that I'm only using these physical examples because they're easy to speak. But what I really mean is actions in the spiritual realm. So the answer is yes. There are other things. There are things called objective conditions. So in the Buddhist system, there are things called objective conditions. So if you think bad thoughts about people with Miatas, and then 3 days later a Miata rear-ends you, it is not because it is an objective condition. The Miata person was not thinking about driving, you were stopped, and they hit you. It's not because you had bad thoughts. We're not saying, that gets into kind of weird juju that we don't believe in. So objective conditions do exist, and then there's this unfortunate word called collective karma. Okay, so large groups of people have take actions of various kinds, and those will also have results. So if you're, the examples are always so extreme. If you're a member of the Hells Angels, but you didn't actually throw the guy off the dock, but you were standing there when they threw him off the dock, you could be in trouble anyway. And you didn't do it. You could have been saying, hey, just let him go. But, well, the other guys were throwing him off the dock. You remember my friend from New Jersey who probably shouldn't have messed with the Hells Angels. It didn't happen. But I was thinking about it the whole time that happened was, oh no, we're going in the water. I was kind of hoping, because I knew the water was about 20 feet deep there, and it was only 20 feet down. We'd be fine. Just have to swim, get wet. A lot of worse things that can happen in your interaction with the Hells Angels. So, and if anybody out there is watching, I mean this in the most kind and gentle way. So, So our own actions, mostly in the spiritual realm, like having to do with our deep values and spiritual practice, those are the actions we're really talking about. Objective conditions exist too, so that Miata 3 days later could hit you, and it really isn't because of what you thought, that we don't mean it in a superstitious way, and that there are collective aspects of karma too that can affect us. So if our if the group we're hanging with does something and we just happen to be standing there, that will affect you, and you didn't do anything. On the other hand, you did decide to be part of that group, so on some level there was a connection. And so, well, what's spiritual about that? Well, I mean, if you're in a group of people who harm people, that has definite spiritual effects. And you've made the choice to be with people who harm people. I'm not saying that it's not just a motorcycle club and it's perfectly fine, it's perfectly legal. Anyway, I just realized this is on YouTube, so oops. So those three aspects. Objective conditions, collective karma, and then our own personal karma are the pieces that kind of flow into that. Okay. Rebirth. Often people have questions about rebirth, so I thought I should mention and talk about it. It's puzzling because, and Dr. Matsunaga specifically said, for those of you who had that feeling like, oh boy, here we go, when I said the word rebirth, some people like totally don't believe in rebirth. My father, wonderful person, literally said to me one time, you live, then you dead, you die, you're dirt. Okay, well, that's one way of looking at things. The Buddhist sense of rebirth can apply even to such a materialist view, because who we are in one moment or 10 years later in your life, I don't know if you've ever looked back at pictures of yourself 10 years ago, sometimes it's dramatically different. And sometimes it's kind of cringe-worthy, and other times there's a longing, like, I wish I had that life. I wish I was that person, because the person I am now it's harder to be that person. We've all experienced those, and that sounds different. I should roll back. In Hinduism, they say reincarnation, because it's an eternalist philosophy. They believe there is an eternal soul. That eternal soul is put into a body. Incarnation means that you put the soul in a carne, in a bunch of meat. I think that's what carne means. So Buddhists don't use that word. We try to use the word rebirth to differentiate, in a sense, because we see things as one thing becoming another, becoming another, becoming another. That's our sense of rebirth. So where to go with this? How about if there isn't an eternal soul? That's what non-self is about, anatta, and everything is an interweaving of causes and conditions that come together to be what I feel like is me right now. But 10 years from now, what I feel like is me is the flowing together of substantially different causes and conditions. Maybe 10 years from now, I will think of myself as grandpa, and I will be playing with little grandchildren and stuff all the time. I will have retired from being a priest, and that will be what my identity is wrapped around, is those causes and conditions. Grandchildren. That's a very different person than I am now, because I'm kind of temple priest. I'm thinking about the nuts and bolts of this and how to teach and all the wonderful aspects of this life. So in a lot of ways, who I am now and who I will be then are really quite different. Now, sure, legally I'm the same person, but spiritually there's a dramatic difference of who we are from one time to another. So the idea of non-self, the Buddha used the example of the candle. I also have a candle here, and we talked about the candle flame it's a dynamic reaction, right? The oil and it's actually a lamp, it's not a candle. The oil in the lamp is burning, so that's a reaction that's occurring. And if we take a time snapshot right now, and then we think about the candle flame, and then we come back and take a new time snapshot, is it the same or different in those two time frames? Well, you could be real stickler and say, well, it's different, because it's different oil, it's different heat, it's different light, it's completely different than it was before. I mean, yeah, you can kind of say, you can just generalize and say it's the same candle, but really, that flame is completely different at time 1 from time 2 when we measured it. And then if we actually look at it, it's not the same. It's never really the same. It's a little bit different all the time. That's what this non-self thing is kind of about. That changeful quality. You know, the Buddha, it's a middle way. So he's not saying you have no soul, and he's not saying you have an eternal permanent soul that's always going to be named Larry. It's somewhere in between. And that's what we're trying to communicate with this idea of the candle flame. Now, in the reading, I think we talked, or the other slide presentation, we talked about the Buddha kind of says that these 5 skandhas, these 5 heaps flow into us, and that is who we are right now, but that flow is a constant flow. He called them heaps just to kind of diminish. They're not like the sacred soul, the amazing. No, it's not like that. They're just heaps of stuff. There's physical stuff, there's form, which is form. There's sensation, sensing things. There's perceiving that sensation. There are mental formations, which are kind of like the biases and prejudgments we use to operate in the world. I know that's a carpet. I know this is a stool. If I refigured that out every time I moved through the world, I would be overwhelmed. And then consciousness. Consciousness is when I actually notice that while I can call this a stool, there's a lot of other aspects to the thing I'm sitting on, and I can be aware of those things when I have time and quiet and, the space to do it. So those are all the things that are flowing together, these 5 skandhas, to be who we are. Now, I got to go back. So in rebirth, a little hard to navigate. Up is not up if you're pointing the wrong direction. Okay, so traditionally we describe these 6 realms as the realms of rebirth. So we're humans, and we all interact with animals all the time. That's a lesser birth to being born human, because animals kind of run on a set program and they're not really able to make very significant decisions in life. They can experience pain, but they can't really do a lot about it. There's a even worser birth is hungry ghost, which are kind of like ghosts that are consumed with wanting all the time. And then there's a hell birth, which is constant torment. When I say constant, the whole time in your hell, it's tormenting. But then when all the karmic conditions that flowed together to result in your hell birth are over, then another birth will occur, and so that will be over. So the big difference between, if the word hell rang some bells from a previous church you might have belonged to, it's not eternal. So that's the only good news in terms of Buddhist hell. There are 300 Buddhist hells, so that's maybe goes the other way on the scales of it's not forever, but there's 300 of them. We even have cold hell, which is kind of interesting, because obviously if you're into Dante, hot hell is the only hell. But we have both. Was it cold? Oh, Dante's 9th ring was cold. I stand corrected. I could be wrong. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I wonder if he borrowed that. I'm trying to think time-wise that interaction with Asia had occurred, because the Renaissance, so the whole Silk Road thing could have gone back and forth. But we all have experienced a hellish cold in life. We all have experienced all these. I'll just finish the realms and then I'll get to the symbolic explanation. Above the human realm, there's a demigod realm where the asuras are very powerful, kind of conflicty, kind of warlike kind of beings. Titans, I guess, is a Greek word for those kind of demigods. And then there's the heavenly realm, quite wonderful. The floating people with no legs in the lamp up there are devas. It's just kind of wonderful all the time. So why the Buddha said, well, that's a pleasant birth, it's not that useful, because it's so wonderful all the time. Why would you think about spiritual matters? Why would you start to make, what is there to be reflective of if you're just kind of floating in clouds, eating manna all the time? It's not all it's cracked up to be. One way of looking at things from the Buddhist point of view is almost all other religions, their whole goal is to end up in the heavenly realm. The Buddhist point was, it's nice temporarily, but when all the causes and conditions that resulted in your heavenly birth expire, then your birth will occur somewhere else. What if you could check out of this whole system? What if you could be interconnected with the Dharmakaya, with the truth body of the universe? That won't occur anymore. So the ocean of births and deaths, one after the other, on and on and on for vast expanses of time, would be over for what you call you now. That's actually the most wonderful, because then you'd be experiencing the joyful quality of the whole universe forever. So it sounds like heaven, but it's not really. It's a different way of looking. It's checking out completely. What did Timothy Leary or whoever said that? He said something like, tune in, turn on, no, drop out, which means don't be part of samsara. Tune in, no, is tune in the second one? Turn on, okay, that makes sense, Turn on, so recognize the vibrant quality of actual reality. And then what's the third one? Tune out. No, that doesn't make sense. Maybe you got to tune out, drop out, tune in. Anyway, there's three things. It does express this idea that somehow being part of a painful cyclical cycle is just not worth it. And you can separate yourself from that and let it go and experience life in a wonderful way. So you really just kind of don't care if you're super richity rich. It doesn't matter anymore. You can just live life, care for other beings, and that's wonderful. Something like that. Kind of. So these realms of rebirth, you can see them symbolically. Obviously, the heavenly realm is kind of, sitting on the couch, eating popcorn, watching Netflix. Nothing wrong, nothing happening, but nothing wrong. So, well, is that really good? I don't know. It's not unpleasant. The hell realm, a cold hell. I don't know if you get lost when you're cross-country skiing and a snowstorm starts. You're in cold hell. You could die. It's really cold. Or maybe there's a cold hell in a relationship where you've been friends for a long time and then all of a sudden there is no warmth anymore. And that's a terrible feeling. It lasts for a little while and then it resolves one way or another. That's the sense of hell is not forever in Buddhism. But it can be quite terrible and challenging. You could also learn something from it. You could see karmically how the seeds were planted to get to that point, and then change your way of acting so that it doesn't occur. So then it wouldn't really be bad anymore. We're kind of the story of the farmer and his son. So birth in hell is quite useful. You can never really reach enlightenment if you don't know what hell is. You have to. Not to seek it out. That's not necessary. There's plenty of opportunities just in real life. The same thing, we can do this for all of them. In Buddhism, we describe that being a birth as an animal as problematic because, the cat always wants to kill. It just always does. It may seem like a really wise being, but really it's just sitting there, just looking through the window thinking, how can I kill that bird? And that's its thought. It's a predator. It's a very good predator. It operates well. It's skillful. But it can't transcend that programming in any way. As long as it's a predator, it will predate, it will kill, and then there are some karmic consequences of killing. I would stipulate, and I didn't mention it when we were talking about karma, that intentional actions create karma and plant seeds. Unintentional actions do not. So that's kind of a strange caveat, but we should mention that. So on some level you could say, well, the cat didn't intend to. Well, no, the cat's whole being is wrapped around that intention of killing repeatedly, you know. It's not that I don't like cats. I am allergic to cats, but I was named after a cat. We had a cat named Matthew, and it was kind of big and squishy and dark, and I was born, so then I met it. But my memory is of a child's view of a cat. Its calmness and warmth, they tell me, was the reason they named me after the cat. I think they just couldn't think of another name, and they'd already named the cat Matthew, so why not? So you can see how these realms could be understood as just mind states that we experience as through our life. We're born into, and then that dies, and then something else is born in us. And so we can have a time when we did ride with the Hells Angels, but then we got over that, and now we work at this halfway house, and it's great. So maybe that was an unfortunate demigod birth where we're violent but strong, and we realize there's problems with that, and those causes and conditions expired, and so we could flow into another possibility. So the sense of rebirth, if we can kind of keep it open and think, well, maybe it means after this body dies, then my karmic consciousness flows onward into another body. That's the traditional view. But the Buddha might have meant sure that, but what about all the time between when you were 5 years old and now? You've been many different people, and recognize that and accept that, and don't cling on to any of the previous identities of who you are. That might be a lot of what the Buddha is talking about. So the idea of the candle as a reaction. So people aren't things, they're events. That's a good way to encapsulate this rebirth thought. We're just events. That opens up many possibilities and changes. That's a different understanding, and that fundamentally changes how we experience life if we integrate that thought. So we're very close to finished, and I hope it doesn't seem like I'm rushing through important stuff. I don't intend that. It is of great importance to me. Non-self. So Buddhism offers a way to live a joyful life. That is our whole goal with Buddhism. That's the whole reason the Buddha went on his great quest, why he left the palace and everything. He wanted beings to be joyful, and they're not, and he noticed that. If we thought of ourself as this kind of tangled knot thing, maybe it's just a matter of untangling it. So sometimes to untangle things, we have to give some slack and relax about things a little bit. And then there's an aspect of reflection that's important. The delusion of the permanence of ourself is the fundamental bit in all Buddhism, regardless of school or denomination or whatever. It's all Buddhism. And that problematic crux of the self wanting and thirsting for its reality, when in fact it's just the flowing together of causes and conditions, is the key bit that we would want to communicate of Buddhism. If we can untangle that, I had a hard time figuring out what untangled looked like, so I just picked the string on the spool picture. Living following the Eightfold Path is a way to untangle that knot, and so we construct a worldview that is right side up instead of upside down. We think skillful thoughts will plant good karmic seeds, and those will bear fruit. We can see that causality is real in our life when we reflect, and then we can not be burdened so much by the crushing weight of evil karma that we have planted or perpetrated in the previousness of our life. So that's my big finish. So thank you all very much. We can talk about questions. We usually turn off the stream, but Reverend Shelley's not up there. So I want to mention that the Shin Buddhism class starts next Saturday. So if you could sign up for that, that would be helpful. Then we get your name on the list and we can send you the book and all that kind of stuff. The sign up thingy is on the website under Buddhist Education, I think, tab or something like that. If that is all of what I've said is flummoxing, then just ask us and we'll sign you up. Reverend Michelli always has that clipboard with actual people's names written on paper. So if you would like to come to that, please do. We'll do the same thing we did here. So we have streamed, so if people have to miss one class, they can kind of just watch it on YouTube and then they kind of get caught up. But that will be fun. So we'll focus in on the specific part of Buddhism we call Pure Land Buddhism. Shin Buddhism is one aspect of Pure Land Buddhism. Shinran Shonin, the founder about 850 years ago, started our specific lineage in Japan, and that's what we'll talk about. There is the next things happening at the temple are chanting this afternoon. So we talked about different practices. You could try that out. That is at 4 o'clock. Good thing I didn't say 3. No, 4 o'clock. We have cleaning at 3. That's fun. Everybody enjoys tidying things up, getting everything ready. And then the piece of chocolate cake is then we get to enjoy chanting together. See how that works? Tomorrow, Sunday, we have beginner's meditation at 9 o'clock on the first floor in the Kanon room. So you can come to that if you're interested in another Buddhist practice, which is quiet sitting meditation. And then there will be a Dharma talk and a Sunday service at 10 o'clock in this hall. So if you haven't been to one of those and you've come to the class, I encourage you to come to a service, see what that's like, and there will be things that resonate from this class that will occur, and then that will be reinforcing and good and useful. So those are all my announcements. So thank you all very much, and maybe we will see you soon. And I assume the stream has ended.